Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to tonight's keynote lecture. Tonight's lecture series is sponsored by the Seed Fund program. So there'll be a brief few slide introduction to the Seed program for those of you that may not know their mission on KAUST, and then we'll introduce tonight's keynote speaker. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good evening. I think the mic is, can I hold this mic? Is it better? Because this is far away. 1, 2, all right. Okay, well, good evening everybody. Thank you for coming today, and we're very pleased to welcome you tonight in this lecture that we will be reaching to very, very shortly. My name is Amal Dukhan, and I'm here presenting the Seed Fund department, and we're very pleased to have you and would like to brief you about our department before we move on to the amazing lecture that we're going to have today about our speaker. So, we as Seed Fund, we come from the New Venture. New Venture department is actually two-part department, as we have Seed Fund, us, and the Entrepreneurship Center. In the Entrepreneurship Center, we really love entrepreneurs, and we love great ideas. So we hope that you could be part of it one day. In the Entrepreneurship Center, we could provide training and lots of mentorship to everyone who has a great idea or just the start of an innovative idea and who needs help and guidance in his business. We provide a lot of mentorship by specialists as well. We inspire those entrepreneurs to guide them to the right way. After graduating or moving through the Entrepreneurship Center courses, which we have one currently going on in our center at the moment, which is the UC Berkeley training, we actually teach those students, or scientists or researcher or business people. It's actually a wonderful mix that we have in our department at these days, all looking to achieve one goal, which is to have a dream business. They all have great ideas and we'd like to move them forward towards, the dream. So in the Seed Fund department, we offer two things. We offer seed funding, which could reach up to $200,000 to actually achieve your business idea. And we have the pre-seed funding, which is a smaller amount of fund that reaches up to $30,000 that could help you to build your prototype. And then you will be qualified to go to the seed funding. So in Seed Fund as well, we provide incubation, capital funding, as we just said, and we help the entrepreneurs to actually, develop their products and to reach their customers in the best way possible. In the future, we're hoping to reach the early stage, fund where we can fund them as well at the beginning of, their business. So by this way, we can take them to the next level of growth. The Seed Fund provides, as I just told you, up to $200,000. We also provide offices and labs. So you can provide, a testing area for your prototype if you need to test it. So offices, if you need to hire any employees, you can consider your own or your first headquarter, and it would be a great place to start. We could also help you in networking assistance, mentors and business experts from all around the world and from the local market as well. We also provide IP and legal support whenever it's needed. So Seed Fund in general, try to turn the great idea or any scientific innovations or any innovative ideas into great business ideas and great projects. And hopefully one day we will be the people, reaching all of these goals seamlessly in this place. So far our journey has been interesting. We are still fairly young, over than 2 years, and hopefully we can last for more. We have 7 completed rounds. We have 25 Seed Fund winners, 9 active projects, 6 graduated teams, and 3 company formations, and 15 jobs created in the Saudi market. And we hope that these numbers would increase more and more with every new round. I'll show you some of our projects and some of our companies that actually got the seed funds. Acadux, and I think most of you know it who registered in this course, Acadux actually is a community-based system that facilitates the academic life of students. And it's a very, very nice idea that is owned by young entrepreneurs that we wish them the best of luck. They're doing very good in joining, so many universities joining their website. iDive, one of the coolest ideas, first solution to enable full functionality of touch devices underwater. So for all divers, you can use your mobiles, your iPads, and under the water, and you can continue working over there. Mecca Window, it's a mobile application to view inaccessible or destroyed sites in Mecca. So it is a very useful tool for people who go to Mecca for the first time and would like to know much about the history. Nomad is actually a dust removal system of the solar panels. It's a very useful thing because most of the solar panels are actually in the desert or in a sandy area. So it would be so great to have it cleaned without any effort. And so many people consider this a very good device because it could really eliminate a lot of costs. Osmo H2O is actually one of the projects. It's a membrane-based technology to help create fresh water out of wastewater. Hashid is a highly accurate system that enables real-time human counting and tracking. It actually helps you monitor or helps governments actually, or big organizations if they want, or regular users to know where is the crowd. We know that it's crowded, but would like to know how much crowded it is. At the end, Seed Fund is a program that aims to motivate people. It aims to create, their business ideas and bring it to reality. We hope that you could join us and check our website. And Seed Fund Spring Round, the next one, will be open on February 3rd, 2014. We hope that you can actually try our website and try to join with any idea, and it would be so great to go through this journey. So this is actually for our Seed Fund. Thank you for listening for that one, and I will move to our speaker definitely today. Our speaker today has a very interesting concept. It's a very interesting idea because basically the globe is changing, the world is changing, and there is a lot going on. And that's what he will be telling us about, and the effects on the world and what do people think of. Our speaker for today is a communication specialist. He's a person who has been interested in journalism, in writing. He started his career working with the United Nations as in human development and human development reporting as well until 2005. And then after that, he started freelance writing and lecturing all around the world, talking about global issues, about the human and about the world changing as well. And then he joined the Gap Mind Foundation as well. So today he will be talking about these changes, the implications on the world. Why do we need to know them? And there are lots of interesting stuff. Please welcome Staffan Landin. He's over here with us. So I'll leave the stage to you. And if we can please welcome him, it would be really great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Staffan Landin. I'm very happy to be able to speak to you today about these issues that I've been working with for, well, the last 15 years of my life in different forms, in different ways. I think that will land pretty well where I've been working or what I've been doing as we go along. I'm also very pleased to be here in Saudi Arabia, much warmer than Sweden, where I come from, which actually some parts had minus 40 degrees when I left home yesterday. So it's 70 degrees difference, which is a good thing to be here then. I'm very glad to get this opportunity. I do work as a writer and a lecturer, and I teach about global development mostly in Northern Europe, but around the world where I get the chance, where I'm invited. For a long time I've been working with this professor, Professor Hans Rosling. If you haven't seen him online on YouTube or on his TED videos, you should really check it out. It's very interesting perspective about changes in the world that we might not have noticed before. TED.com is obviously a great site to see lectures. So you can see them there, or at gapminder.org, which is the foundations. Everything they do is free of charge, and the whole idea is to change the world through increased knowledge and use of statistics and global data sets. So that is what I'm here to talk about today. We have seen some great changes over the last couple of decades all over the world in many different areas. Changes that concerns economy, income levels, global health issues, diseases, education, huge difference in demography and demographic changes, as well as in technology and environment, of course. So the world today, and that's my main message, that I think it's super important to repeat to itself all the time, that the world today is completely different from the world 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It goes faster and faster, these changes, and my message is that by using what we do know about the world and by having an updated and a fact-based worldview, the chances that we make the right decisions for the future are much more accurate. So we should base those decisions as good as accurate kind of worldview and description of the world that we can have with the knowledge base of today. And we don't know everything. There's a lot we don't know about changes in the world, but there's so much more that we do know that we're not even using in our decision making. That goes for students, for teachers, for professors. I think it applies to politicians, to organizations that talks about the world, to writers, and especially, I guess, to the media, that for most people still is the window through how we look upon the world. So I will talk a little bit about the media images of different parts from my part of the world. Not to say that it's the same in different parts of the world. And I think the preconceived ideas that we bring in to our own explanation about how the world looks is very different from different parts of the world. The Swedish preconceived ideas is not the same as the United Kingdoms or Saudi Arabia or an African country or United States. But it's really, really important that we try as far as we can to break those preconceived ideas and use the best public data that we do have. It demands of us to make those decisions that we use the available statistics and data sets in a proper way, and that we understand them, what they're showing. Not only we, but people that we also are talking to. That we use science, that we use that in much larger degree in the discussion about global development that is being done today. It puts a demand on us to base our worldview on facts and not what we think the world looks like. Especially, I think, when science or public data tells us something that we don't want to hear. Something that breaks our own worldview and paints a different picture of what we thought the world looked like. Those kind of information are always very hard to tackle, and you get frustrated when somebody tells you the world doesn't look the way you do. But I think the key for any science, or the key to really understand this, is specifically when you hear something that doesn't really coincide with your preconceived ideas, to listen very carefully and see what could be behind those numbers. So I think I would like to break through a few of those myths that we have found in our work, not only in our part of the world, but we think some of the idea is hard to understand, even though there are some of these trends I'm going to show are very, very basic trends in human development that we all actually do know, but maybe not really understand the scope of, because these changes that we have seen is so, in many cases, so fundamental that it is impossible today to foresee all the effect it will have on the planet, on the environment, on us as human beings living in this world. So I'll try to make some sense of some of those trends. Look at this graph. Can you hear me even though I go up here? Yes, good. Well, you couldn't answer me if you... Stupid question, sorry. This is the world 200 years ago. In the beginning of the 19th century, we turned 1 billion people. The population turned 1 billion. So that means that it took us all human history, and how that long it depends on what you define as human and what you believe on and so on, but at least a couple of thousand years, probably a couple of 100,000 years, some scientists says a couple of million years, to become from the first kind of blob that we once were to become 1 billion human being on this planet. That was in the beginning of this century. Back then, this graph shows GDP per capita on one axis and life expectancy on the other. This is a basic graph that we very often start with when we talk about the world. It shows, we use it as a kind of a map, but instead of north and south, we have health. So we put up one health indicator there. It could be child mortality rate, which is a very, very good measurement of health in a country and captures many different trends. So that's a very good measurement of where things have been going in the right direction. Child mortality rate. In this case, we start with life expectancy, the average year a person dies this year. So this is in 200 years ago. In the beginning of the 19th century, no country in the world had a higher life expectancy than 40 years. Poverty, underdevelopment, and deprivation, high mortality rate, really high child mortality rate, and high fertility rate as well, was the norm 200 years ago for all countries in the world. Not maybe for all people in those countries. Obviously, there were people living 100 years, even 200 years ago. Sorry. But on average, that was where the countries were. We had the UK already starting its economic growth 200 years ago. That's the Netherlands. Sweden is at the exact same place as Cuba. Dark blue is sub-Saharan Africa. You can see the colors there. Green, North Africa and the Middle East region. And red is East Asia. And then something happened over these 200 years. And now we are at this position. So it took us all human history to become 1 billion people. The last billion, to go from 6 to 7 billion, took 12 years. So it has gone faster and faster and faster. And also economic development. Look how many who is up in this corner now, around $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 per capita. Most countries are here, but still some countries, specifically in sub-Saharan Africa, is still as poor on average as many countries were 200 years ago. But what I want to do here today is to stop and try to see when did this change happen and why and in what cases and which countries moved in which direction and to try to explain this world map a little bit. We would like this world map to be as used as a geographical world map because this explains different things than a world map does. For example, when a disaster happens on Haiti, why does it affect so much more people than in Cuba or United States? I mean, you think that the wind is just as strong as in the neighboring country as in the first country, but poverty plays an important role on how those kinds of disasters affect people, obviously. That's why a lot more people dies in the hurricanes in 2005 on Haiti than in Cuba or in the United States, because poverty does matter and the way that society is built. So that's the situation we are today. I would like to talk a little bit about the importance that we do have this upgraded worldview and why sometimes we lack that information. When I've been out talking since at least 2005, and also Gapminder and Professor Hans Rosling, we used a very simple pre-test that I would like to show you. Very first, just a very simple conceptual idea. This is the world, we measure it in data. This link is very strong. Here we have been measuring different things for very many decades. In some countries, we have good data for a couple of 100 years back in time. And this could obviously be better. And in many different sciences, we work on strengthening what we do know. But not until that data is being used and become knowledge, go back to the world, to universities, to organizations, to the media outlets, then it becomes some kind of public knowledge. And this link has been too weak for too long. And the public data sets that we have in our field, global health and global development, has for long been locked up in statistical agencies, in the World Bank, who charge money. They ask all countries of the world, hey, give us statistics, and then they put it on a DVD or a CD and sold it back to students. I think the World Development Indicators, when it was sold, had 1,000 or 1,200 buyers globally in the whole world, which is obviously nothing with all the knowledge collected for so many different indicators for all countries of the world. Now the World Bank data is their data, and there are many different statistical agencies and producers that kept the data secret. Now World Bank has finally opened up its data sets, actually much because of Mr. Professor Hans Rosling that made fun of them at statistical conferences and joked about them and told them every time he spoke, he said, you have to release your data so that you can present them in such a good way as we can. And finally, after 10 years or so, they gave up, and so now they release all the data for free. That's a very good thing. But that link is very important because we have so much knowledge in these databases, and it's only a few that actually uses them to analyze and draw conclusions. This is the latest report from UNICEF that measuring child health, and this is not the raw material that they work with. This is the output material. This is what they give to organizations or the media. If you want to understand the world, you get a report this thick with this many tables. And it's very hard to understand it in the first place, but specifically to see the trends over time, to draw the right conclusions and analysis from them. That leaves it with a few, 2 or 3 persons at UNICEF to decide which areas or countries we should focus on in this report, because they have read the whole thing and gone through the data material and so on. But what if we could visualize that data and animate it so that anyone could understand what the report said immediately and get the immediate understanding, at least the first understanding, what the data shows, and then we could use our brain capacity at the right things to understand why is this happening, or what are the reasons for that the world looks the way it does, or what can we do to change it. And that is what we would like the creativity to be about, not to understand the statistics. I worked for UNDP, United Nations Development Program, and we made this report. This is also the output material. It's hopeless and only interesting for a very few statistical nerds, like my friends. But what we did then, or what Gapminder, then when I stood and tried to get the audience to look at these reports, then Hans Rosling, the professor, came and said, no, we should do it like this. We should put it in the database and we should visualize it. And this was only 10 years ago. And today, there are so many more new tools, brilliant programmers, students, young people all over the world that could make a much better product than this one. But they were kind of a pioneer in this field and started to get public data out there so that with the new tools, I mean, the tools are getting better and better every year. And the programming languages are getting easier and better for every year. So I think we only see the beginning of infographics or trying to understand very complex and big data sets in a way that makes sense to any end user that sees them online or in a TV program and so on. And why is this important? Because it helps us to understand the world and see the world more correctly so that we can make the right decisions and not be overly scared or overly pessimistic or optimistic or just make the wrong decisions. So this was Gapminder, and then when the World Bank released the data, they made a really good data page with also visualizations, and then Google bought Gapminder software. So now you can actually go into Google and just type in a search field like child mortality Tanzania, and you would get an actual graph. And in the Google field, this is inside the actual Google field, and you can see a moving graph. This shows how child mortality is decreasing. It's not a very good graph. I will show a much better graph in a second. And this was totally impossible 5 years ago to just search and it seems maybe not as a big thing, but it's a huge thing. So now when a student or a young kids want to write a report about a specific country or a specific issue, it's much easier for him to find data. Because otherwise, when you Google this, you would find a PDF file from OECD or something and try to understand that data and copy-paste, as you know, from a PDF file is quite hopeless. So I think it's a good step forward, and it's much better today than it used to be. We have asked the same couple types of questions, the pre-test I was telling you about. Hans came and tested us 10 years ago at the UN. We had all the answers wrong on this one. So when I went out 2005, I asked people in specifically Northern Europe, where I was traveling, where is child mortality lowest? And then I used child mortality as a measurement of development. So which of these countries or areas are most developed when it comes to this? Is it Turkey or Libya? And I've changed these over the years. I used to choose Vietnam because they have managed to have success in some areas, but maybe not in others and so on. So Sri Lanka or Brazil, Singapore or Sweden, which has the lowest child mortality rate, which is the safest place to give birth to a child? Is it Riyadh or Washington, D.C.? Is it Estonia or is it South Korea? And I picked these ones because I knew that the Swedes would get this completely wrong, and I was correct. And I've been able to find at least 4 out of 5, trick them for every single lecture I've ever held. And it's now, I don't know, very many anyway. Because the right answer is that Libya has lower child mortality rate than Turkey. Sri Lanka is lower than Brazil. Singapore has lower than Sweden. And we have always thought we was the best country in the world. But if you're going to have a child today and you want to be absolutely sure, or the biggest chances for survival, you should actually live in Singapore. Riyadh has lower child mortality rate than Washington, D.C. And Saudi Arabia is now almost caught up with, for example, the United States in child mortality rate. And the fact that Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, is the part of the United States with the highest child mortality rates because the people in the capital are poor. All the rich moved out, and the state itself is just around the capital. So, and poor people don't get health care as good in the United States. That's why child mortality rate in the capital is 4 times higher than in Utah, for example, a state in the United States. South Korea has much lower child mortality rate than Estonia. And these, I picked them because in the preconceived ideas in my constituency, this is where they would guess wrong. When I'm in, for example, the United States, I show them Mexico, and they think Mexico is this poor, underdeveloped country that only wants to live in the United States. But when I show them statistics that shows that Mexico, in very many social areas, is today where the United States was 2003, they will get very surprised when it comes to the number of children per woman or health care and so on. Because the world is moving, and this is a picture that we don't always get. Now I should say with some of the statistics here, the margin of error is quite big, and we really don't know. This is specifically when it comes down to subnational data. It's my estimations, but they are very correct in this case, actually. So what he did to make fun of this is that he called it a chimpanzee test, that we tested if we gave people in United Kingdom, in this case, we gave them 4 options for every question. That meant that chances that they would get 1/4 was right. They would get at least 25% correct answers. That's why we call it the chimpanzee test, because if we gave the question to a chimpanzee, he would get every 4th question right. And the fact was that in the questions that we picked, or the Gapminder picked, the teachers and the professors and the politicians and the media were worse than the chimpanzee. But obviously they don't know less than apes. Obviously we don't, but they are kind of trick questions. But specifically it goes to show that it's not a lack of knowledge in this case. It's preconceived ideas, that people have been taught that the world, or taught themselves that the world looks in a specific way. And when data comes and show that something has happened since you went to school, it's very hard because you don't get that update. So we asked a couple of questions. I won't go into detail because it's kind of boring. But we asked child mortality in the world is actually 5% child mortality rate today. Most people who answered thought it was much more. How many get vaccines? It's actually 80% of the children today get measles vaccine, much higher than 10 years ago or 5 years ago. But most people thought it was much less. The literacy rate of the world is now 80%, and most people that we talked to thought it was less. And global poverty, income poverty, the number of people living under $1 or $1.25 a day, has it increased or decreased, or has been stable since 1990? And most people thought it has increased when it in fact has almost halved. It used to be 50% living in poverty, and now we're down to probably 20%. These numbers are very hard, huge margin of error. Some say that the World Bank just makes them up, and they may be not that wrong in this area. But the fact is that for sure poverty has been going down over the last couple of decades, specifically during the last 10 years. And that's a picture that most people did not have. So my point is just that when we did this test on people in our constituency, most people thought that the world was much worse than it actually is. Specifically in the countries that used to be rich countries, when we talk about countries that used to be poor, they think it's much worse off than it actually is, in most cases. And it may be not so difficult when this is the only picture in our part of the world that comes in the media. Never any progress, when we know that progress. And you probably, I don't know if you recognize this picture at all, the media picture of the world, but media has a bias of portraying negative news compared to positive news, because that's in the media logic. And when you study to be a journalist, you read about this and you know why it is like that. And it's important to know that, but I don't know if it's per definition wrong of the media to write more about a war than about peace. Because when it is an accident on the road, that's obviously a news, but when it's no accident, that is no news. And this whole logic creates a feeling that this is the only picture. And these are true pictures. They are poverty, and we have civil war, and we have drought, or floods, or disasters. This happens all the time, but it happens less and less. And if we only get this picture and never a positive picture, and no matter what areas we talk about, if we talk about area or development or peace or war, if we only get the negative news and never the positive, then our worldview would get skewed. And that would be a bad thing, I argue. So this is a picture. We seldomly hear this picture, for example, of African countries. But remember my point there, that I'm not saying that it's per definition wrong, but we should remember that when we see BBC or CNN or Al Jazeera, or read the paper that we do read, that this bad is not the world. Every single day, probably, the world is better than BBC tells you. You should remember that, because that's per definition so, I would say. So I would like to go through a few of these areas that I would like to talk about. And the first thing that's very important, and again, I will start very basic, and you all know this, but I think it's important to have it as a reminder. And when I'm out talking to people, I always remind them that we cannot talk about averages. And let's start with the world. Obviously, we know that we can't talk about how long do we live in the world, or what's the GDP per capita in the world. It's pointless information, because we know that there are big differences. So we have to split up the world, because on this axis we have income and health again. So on average, a person, life expectancy in the world is now 70 years, but in sub-Saharan Africa, it's between 50 and 60. And in North America, it's almost 80 years in life expectancy. South Asia, a little bit lower. East Asia, a little bit higher. We have different regions here. And we have up there, I can't see really on that one, the color were not quite good, but we have Western Europe here, a little poorer than North America, but still we live longer in Sweden than in the United States. But East European here has fallen back after the Soviet Union's fall and so on. North Africa is moving in the right direction. But again, it's pointless to talk about average even in regions, that we have to split up this region as well. So Africa is actually here. And to talk about Africa as a thing, as a concept, is again pointless, because are you talking about Libya or Botswana, who is richer than Russia, for example? Or do you talk about South Africa, or do you talk about Democratic Republic of Congo? Again, you all know this goes without saying, but it's an important reminder. And when we talk about, in this case, all Asia, do we talk about Yemen or Afghanistan or Hong Kong or Macau or China? We have to go beyond these averages. So this is a much better way of talking. But it's obviously hard, because we have 200 countries and we have many different indicators. So it has been very difficult to capture these trends. And that's why I think if we don't make them, we don't simplify the message, we don't simplify the data, but if we could, in a way, simplify the presentation so we actually could understand what has happened, then we would have moved a bit on the way towards better understanding, I would say. One of the most important graphs that we would like to show, and one of my favorite graphs, is this one. And it's about total fertility rate and life expectancy rate. Two of the most important, but two very basic indicators of human life: how many children that we give birth to and how long we actually do live. Two of the foundations of human life. And if we look at the graph from 1950, then we can see here, this is the number of children per woman, live children that were born per woman in 1950. Every bubble is a country again. We have children per woman there, life expectancy on that axis. So we have China, we have United States. This is basically Western Europe that was a little bit ahead on this curve. But you see in color again, continent or region, actually WHO regions. We had no countries up here and no countries up here. And that's when we start to talk about the developing countries and the developed countries, or the, I don't know which term that we have been using over the years. Some talk about the north and south, and because we want to have this basic concept of we and them. And we split the world differently depending on what we talk about. If we talk about economic development or health-wise or security issues and so on. But the fact that we're still talking about developing countries 2014 and try as if it was possible to make this division between a few industrialized countries and developing countries, because all countries are developing and the difference is not between them and them anymore. This is my most important point. And are we still talking about developing countries? Yes, all the time, actually. There is not one global report on economic development, social development, education development from the World Bank, from the EU, from the UNDP, from anyone international that does not divide the world into developed and developing countries. Let me show you what I mean, why I think it's time to have smarter and new definitions. Because how do you define a developing country? What is a developing country? Nobody knows what it is. Is it the ones that were developing countries? Now, obviously not, but how do you graduate from being a developing country? What's the limit? There's no such limit. So it's just because we used to talk about them. So let me click play here, because now you will get 60 years of development. Saudi Arabia was there in 1950, and you could guess where Saudi Arabia is today according to the latest available public data when it comes to children per woman and life expectancy. Would you be surprised if I told you there? That's where they are. Let's see. This is the world in 1950. We had developing countries and developed countries, we call them. And many of them were in different ways under European rule in some areas and some form, very different for different parts of the world. But now I'm going to click play, and we will get 60 years of development in 30 seconds. So this will go fast, so pay attention now. And we can see that first, life expectancy is going up. Look at China there, starting to raise life expectancy. Then they had the Cultural Revolution. People starved to death. They went down, went back up again. And now they're starting their family planning, or actually people starting to have fewer children. India is going along well since independence. Look at Bangladesh far, far behind. And look at the green countries, North Africa, Middle East. We can take a little pause here. In the beginning of the 1980s, life expectancy was going up, development kicked in, economic development, health, education, everything became a little bit better when it comes to measurement, but still very many children per woman. Bangladesh very far behind. India and Latin America is almost up to the same square. Let's continue this travel now. India is down to, or China is down to 2 children per woman. India there. Look at Bangladesh. Go back. Look at the green countries, how very fast they are moving up towards the left corner, super fast. Bangladesh is not caught up. Pakistan a bit behind. Afghanistan far, far behind. Africa is falling a little bit behind. But most countries are gathering up in the left corner, around 1 to 3 children per woman. That was Haiti and the disaster, and we could see the other kind of disasters over the time. China's fall, the Red Khmer regime in Cambodia during the 70s, the genocide in Rwanda was a big dip, and also the huge disaster in Haiti that made life expectancy go down. This is the world in 2012, and it's a completely different world than this. 2012, 1950, 2012. And these are so fundamental changes in human life that we now almost, in all countries, are down towards 2 children per woman. And this is nothing I say which is better, should we have, because it's always up to the individual country, but actually to the individual family to decide. But as almost the most countries have realized is that when in time with education and employment, and when you get out of poverty, and when your children that's being born, when they survive, most families choose to maybe plan the time on when they will have their family, or plan how big their families will be in the end, and end up around 2 or 3 children per woman. It's a step that most countries have gone through in different stages for different reasons, political, religious, and so on. But today the fact is that most countries are down here. I'm not saying that anything is better, but if we could see the consequences of being there, obviously we talk about the growing population for one such area. One term that's fairly romantic or even smart is the replacement level of the human species, like if we were a virus or something. But 2.2 children per woman is the global replacement level. So if average in the world were 2.2 children per woman, then the population growth would even out in a little while. Not super fast, but after some time, population would stabilize. And we are almost there today. We are at 2.4 children per woman or something like that. This growing population is also something that's been filled with myth and preconceived ideas and wrong conception or pictures of where we were going. Today I said we were 7 billion people, and as I said, it took 12 years to go from 6 to 7. So it's been going faster and faster, and if you only look at that trend, where we are going, that is obviously very, very scary. A world with, let's say, 9 or 10 billion people is a different world than a world with 5 billion people. We have to have resources enough. We have to be able to live on this planet together. We have to feed all those 9 billion people. But when we are talking, we see that the general idea is that we will be much more. That's what many people think. This article, that's why Hans Rosling did a BBC documentary called Don't Panic, and we should have some sense. This was in the biggest Swedish and best newspaper, a debate article that was just in 2 years ago. It says, with the birth rate of today, this is the headline, we will soon be 134,000 billion people. Soon. Nevertheless. And I would say that, I mean, if you're sitting there with your morning coffee and read this in the paper, obviously you get scared. Where are those people? Where are those people? But I mean, we will not get 134,000 billion. And the best projections is that it will stabilize around 9 or 10, maybe 11, 12, depending on what we choose, because we are human beings and we can decide our own future. So depending on those decisions, it depends on how many we will be. Another thing I would like to lift up in this is this man, Dan Brown. I don't know if you have read his books. He sells very, very many books all over the world, and also films with Tom Hanks as head actor. And the first one was called Da Vinci Code, and then he made another one that I don't know, but you probably know it as well. And the last one is called Inferno. Anyone here who's read Inferno yet? It's fairly new. It's interesting in a way because it's discussing this problem of a fast-growing population. And I won't spoil the book for you who haven't read it. But let's say it could be some kind of, I don't know, let's say if some kind of terrorist comes along. I'm not saying that it is, but it could be. And let's say that he's planning a way of controlling the number of people on this planet. It's an interesting discussion about what can we do, what is the moral right thing to do. Well, not super interesting because it's Dan Brown, but in its defense, but the whole concept of that the human population is growing exponentially is wrong. And he starts with saying this in a Time interview that there is a statistic I like to blah, blah, blah. The population has tripled over the last 85 years. And he sees that going in the future. And he says that futurists don't consider overpopulation one of the issues of the future. They consider the issue of the future. And the thing is that we already fixed what he is pointing on as the main problem, namely how many children we put on this earth. And he is very, in the book they're arguing, and you get the feeling that, oh, we have tried to throw out different contraceptives and it doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, it does work. And it comes with development and education and lower child mortality rates. And when you see that that is happening, then fertility rate is also going down. We have seen that. And again, 10 billion people could be a problem, but it's very basic. It's very, very simple. How come the population didn't grow faster? Well, this is maybe a too simple graph. I apologize because I drew this myself. But if a man and a woman had 6 children on average in history, why didn't population grow faster? Why did it take so long? Well, because the mortality rates were really, really high. Most kids that were born over the last couple of hundreds, thousands of years died before they became parents themselves. So the most common thing was that we buried our children. The most tragic things I can imagine. I have a son now who is 2 years old, well, 3 years old, called Edward, and he's super cool, and I can't imagine anything else worse than something happened to him. And I'm sure that goes for every parent in the whole world. So this situation, even though it was stable, it was very tragic in a way. So the second step in this demographic transition is that mortality rate went down before the fertility rate went down. That's why it grew so fast. And this step, which I claim we almost are at today, will lead to this. And since we all almost already there, and it had worked, it's not like politicians. It's not like you can sit in a population conference in Cairo in the 70s and say, we have to do this, and then people would obey. But it comes with development. And that's good to know for those countries who haven't had that possibility to do this step yet, is that it is get them out of poverty or help them get themselves out of poverty, and then we could have a chance of stabilizing the population of this planet. And we are almost there. But how come we become, because we're still 3 billion left, it's very simple. The last couple of billion people, this is just the last 3 billion people on the planet. It's not because we have too many babies. It's because we had many babies in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So the last 3 billion, this is why every man here is a million. So if we say like this, that we have 2 billion children on this planet today, we will never be more than 2 billion children on this planet today. Hans Rosling called this peak child. Peak oil we're still debating, but peak child is where we have reached the number of children on this planet is not growing anymore. But they grow old, and they don't die, which is a good thing. So what happens then is that when we grow older, and the oldest generation unfortunately have to pass away, but then this generation, our generation, will get on average to, and again, this is not individual. Everyone can decide for himself how big families, but on average, the world is closing to this now. That means that we will get 2 babies, and then 1 more billion children on this planet in our generation. The next generation, again, the oldest 1 billion have to leave us, and we will get 2 more billion. And then the next step is to stabilize it. This is a super simplification. If I said the last one was a simplification, but you get the point. So the last 3 billion is just a fill-up of the population on this planet. And it's nothing Dan Brown can't do anything with except killing people. So if we're going to stabilize the population lower than this 10 or 9 billion, we have to start killing people. And that, I don't think that is on the table in the discussion of climate change or whatever. I hope not. And again, this is projections. We don't know. We never know what's going to happen with economic development or otherwise, or diseases and so on. So things can always happen for different reasons. And we as human beings cannot project the future. We can guess. No one knows what is in store for us in the future. I just want to make that clear. But as far as we can project, we will be 3 more billion. And we know that people would like to live in cities rather than in the countryside because it's safer and it's easier to get employment. We know all this. So we see many trends that we can plot and guess. So my point is that we should start planning for that kind of future. So fertility rate is coming down on a global level to 2.4 in every, actually, let me just go to the online, sorry about that. This is online on Google thing here. You can see, this is a fantastic tool that you can use. You can just go in and see fertility rates in the world, but you can also go in and see, for example, Sub-Saharan Africa is the only region who has not started this. We saw East Asia, the very successful East Asia economic, they had this decrease first, very rapidly in the beginning, and that helped them in their economic development. That's what happens when you get this demographic push, when you go from 7 to 2 children on average. Then you would get this huge demographic push because there's so many people that can work, and dependency ratio, that's called. So we have that, and again, most region is going in that direction. You can also go down to specific countries, actually, and see for every single country the actual trend for, I'm just showing you this, so now I show Bulgaria. I don't know why that would be interesting to anyone. But anyway, sorry about that. So yes, that's another trend or myth that we would like to break. And I'm kind of provocative here, but I think I do it for a purpose, and it's to start thinking about actually seeing where the world, or realizing where the world has changed when people, and then you know that there are, like China, everyone knows about the China's one-child policy, and Times Magazine also asked Dan Brown that in this interview, do you favor any specific options like the one-child policy? But the thing is, it's up to the individual family and the country they live in, and the one-child policy in China is not what brought down the number of children per woman. And I don't think that any political ideology except for that one or religion would favor the government to in that way decide. I don't think that's in anyone's interest. And the thing is, when China introduced the one-child policy, they already cut fertility rates from 7 children or 6 children down to 3 children per woman. So that's another myth, I would say, that China, in that sense, have been, their success in getting this down is rather development and so on. Never mind, I would leave that now. I said that there wasn't this gap between rich and poor. By that, I didn't mean that there aren't extreme richdom and extreme poverty in the world. Actually, the differences in the world between the richest countries up here and the poorest countries is obviously bigger than basically ever, because we have growth here and Congo has never had economic growth. Just talk about Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. for very natural reasons, for the brutal dictatorship of the Belgian king in the beginning of last century, to the Belgian rule and so on, and then Mobutu, and then the war and so on. So this is the world, though, that the differences between these countries and these countries are bigger than ever before. So when I say that we shouldn't divide between developing and developed countries, I don't mean to say that the world is totally equal, not at all. But the differences are somewhere else. Or actually, we have very, very rich countries and rather rich countries and rather poor countries and extremely poor countries. And there is a continuum. And for me, it makes no sense to draw the line here instead of here and here and here and here. So we need better ways of dividing the countries of the world, because we need also concepts of, but then again, this is we and them, and it's the way we normally do it, and it's very hard to conceptualize this new thinking. I haven't seen anyone really been able to do that yet. So on one hand, yes, the difference is increasing between those and those. But on the other hand, most countries today have life expectancy over 65 years. And this is totally unique. This world we have never seen before, that so many countries have moved so fast in the right direction when it comes to income and when it comes to health, but also education and so on. So this world we've never seen before. And never have so many big populated countries been in this part of this map when it comes to income and health. And we are moving up to that square. And again, I'm not saying that it's always better to be here, but it depends on what you want and politics and so on. And we have countries who made this journey to become first rich and then healthier and then different ways. So there's not one way of developing the world, but this is what the world looks like today. Most countries today are middle-income countries with a life expectancy rate over 65 years, and it's increasing almost everywhere in the world. Eastern Europe had a couple of bad years when they first fell economically and then health-wise, but now again starting to pick up. And some countries like Latvia, Estonia are going very fast, Russia not so fast, Ukraine and Central Asian country a bit slower, but even though health-wise over 65 years of age. South Asia with Bangladesh, Pakistan and India, Sri Lanka, and then Haiti and Sub-Saharan Africa. But for the students I talk to back at home, this view is important to say to them that the world is not a few countries up here and the rest of the world in poverty, obviously not, but that the world has actually moved a lot since I went to school, for example. So that's an important lesson, that the world is better than most people thought, or most countries on average, I would say, is further ahead than we thought. But it's also very tragically, because if we draw a line here at 63, 64 years of age in life expectancy, it is today almost only Sub-Saharan Africa who is below 63 years of age. And the tragic thing is that it's not just only Africa, it's the whole continent of Sub-Saharan Africa, almost. We have Mauritius, the Seychelles, Cape Verde, Madagascar a little bit ahead, but basically most countries. And for different reasons, again, we can't say, oh, this is the situation in Africa, because all the different countries have their different problems. And this is the most important discussion I make when I'm out talking at universities. What is the reason behind this lack of development or development? And this is the issue we have to crack. And this is what we have to know. Why do some countries succeed in that area and others don't? Even if they seem to have the same preconditions. And then my answer is that the more indicators we look at, education, health, geography, diseases, the more detailed you make that analysis, or history, culture, religion, politics, foreign relations, war and peace, and the more fine you make those instruments, the better chance you have of ending up in the right place. And in the global debate on this, I would say that the biggest mistake most people do, and from the whole scale up to scholar writers and so on, is that they simplify not the presentation, but they simplify the solutions or the reasons, and they say it is because of this, it's too much aid or too little aid, or too much war and too much corruption, too little corruption and whatnot. And the thing is, all those things will affect the country, but on different levels, in different times, in different income. So every country is unique, and every income scale is unique. So to simplify that too much is a mistake, I think. And to find the correct answers, we have to look at so many different indicators at the same time that is actually hard to do. But I think Gapminder tool help us to do that. This is then the development since 1960. Back then, there were pretty much less than 1 billion people in this area of the world, Western Europe and United States, and Saudi Arabia, actually. But then, the world has moved on. Most countries moving in the right direction, even most countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, until AIDS came in some countries, not all countries, but in some countries, and we had that drop in life expectancy, which left Botswana, the country, the richest countries in Africa, actually the country with fastest economic growth from its independence in the 70s up until AIDS came in 1990. It was faster than South Korea. They started in the same position, and the growth rate in Botswana, and actually all the way up today, is one of the fastest in the world, but still it's the country, the second country with the lowest life expectancy due to one disease, HIV/AIDS, in Botswana, which is one of the worst affected countries. And today we are 5 billion people in that area, in that income level, that live that long. And what the key issue is that we know that, but what does that make of the development, on the environment, of the resources that we should share? And what can we use, and how is this a good thing, and which obstacles does it say, and which challenges rise from this new world? But I think it's important to know which world we are talking about. Again here, I must say, before we move on to look at some health issues, even here we have to go beyond average, because we can't talk about what's the situation in a country, because we have differences in income, in ethnic groups, and so on. So we have to be able to go inside the bubbles, inside the countries, and this is very hard to do. We don't have global data for most countries. So we can, my dream is that we could go in and click here and decide how we should split this bubble into different regions. We cannot do that today because we lack data for many countries, specifically in time series. We can in some countries. Just to show you what that would be, here China, over 60, this is a few years old data, and life and GDP almost $10,000. So that's China, but China is 1.4 billion people. You cannot say this is the situation in China, because over there we have Macau, which is richest in the world today. Macau there, 40,000, now it's probably 80,000. Hong Kong is like Switzerland, Shanghai is like Portugal, but Guizhou is Bangladesh, and Tibet is like poor as Yemen. So within one country we have this, and this is just the regional differences. This is not income differences or in I don't know, labor or employment groups or whatever. But we have big differences within a country. The same goes for if we take child mortality rate in India. We can say that back then India had 5% child mortality rate, but Kerala, one of the poorest provinces or states actually in India, has as low child mortality rates as Russia, while Uttar Pradesh is as poor as Uganda. So even though India is moving ahead, and in many areas is leading in the world when it comes to brilliant students in many areas, and some parts of India is really, really ahead, draw up the national average. The same time, parts of India, and I don't know how many people live in Uttar Pradesh, but I think it's, anyone who knows, I think it's more than 50 million people. I think it's bigger than Uganda anyway, population-wise. So in India, we have also these problems, even though it looks like the country is going in the right direction. So we have to be able to split that up. India also over 1 billion people. And in fact, there are more poor people in India than in Africa, in all African countries together. The same goes with hunger and so on. So, and I would love to be able to do that. Having said that, it's very clear that we understand how fast the movement is in the world today. And I take these countries, China and India, as an example, how fast they are expected to grow. This again is projection, and GDP per capita. And that doesn't say everything, obviously not, but it says something. And the average Chinese person today, or 2010, were at the same income level as an American 100 years ago. Still, in spite of this great progress. So it's not today that the whole China is very rich, but it's the pace, the growth rate. That means that in only 7 years, they caught up United States 50 years later in development. And it goes faster and faster. And development today is obviously going faster than before. It should, because we have vaccines and antibiotics, and we have trade, and there are rich countries that could help poor countries in a way that they never was able to before. So, and we know much more. Science has come so much further. Technology level has been a tremendous revolution for many poor people in many poor countries, specifically in sub-Saharan Africa. So today should go faster than before, and it actually does. And it's important that we understand that. If we look at the economic growth, which countries have been the fastest on average since 1960, we see that it's South Korea, Taiwan, China, Botswana, Singapore, Hong Kong, over the whole period of time. But if we look at only the last 12 years, or actually 20 years, sorry, then we see a few new countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, again, Korea, Sri Lanka, Cape Verde, or Laos, growing rapidly over the last 20 years. And if we look at the last 6 years, we see countries like Ethiopia, Laos, India, Angola, Rwanda grew very, very fast and faster and faster. So we have seen this great development in new countries now, and it's going very fast. And if we don't see that, then we fool ourselves. Rwanda is a very good example. Everyone knows the horrific genocide in 94 and the struggle before that, the civil war. And it left Rwanda in a very, very hard place. We can see here how life expectancy went up slowly until the genocide, and it dropped back then. And we take a break. So it took 10 years for Rwanda to go back there, to come back to the same income level, to the same life expectancy, to the same maternal mortality or child mortality. It took those years, but this is just to go back to where they were before. But the really true happy story of the development in Rwanda is what happened after this, because they have seen a development that we've never seen before in any country, I would say. That life expectancy today is 15 years longer than it was even before the war. And child mortality rate was 15%. That is 15% of all children that was born died before the age of 5. Today, it's still high, but it's below 5%. That meant that they reached the Millennium Development Goals target that the world set up for 25 years. They reached in 10 years. I haven't seen many countries that decrease child mortality rate that fast in such a short period. I know that the countries that has the lowest today, if we talk about Singapore or Sweden or Iceland, never had that fast development. So something is obviously going in the right direction in Rwanda when it comes to health. And that turns me to talk a little bit about social indicators. Is it Africa's turn now? Well, something has happened, and they managed the financial crisis much better than before. This is a fact that always been thrown out in the debate. Many of the fastest growing countries is today Africa. One should remember that many of those countries are growing fast, but from a very poor position. Tanzania, Rwanda, Mozambique, they are still very, very poor countries, but the growth rate is very fast for different reasons. And now the discussion is, can this last? Is this sustainable, or is it just because of world market prices or whatnot? And we don't know, but obviously most countries in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is at a much better position with much more stable states that can do policies that actually can influence people's lives. As stability is bigger, the wars are fewer, and growth rates for 10, 15 years in a row. So yes, something has happened when it comes to Africa. And will it rise as Asia did 20 years earlier? We don't know, but there's a lot of, I would say that it already happens in very many countries. And if we look at the social indicator, it becomes even more clear than that. This is one of the most positive graphs I could ever show you. And we just look at the watch. Oh, good. Perfect. Because it shows child mortality on these axis. Let's focus on that one. This was the situation only in 1970. It's not that long ago. And this is the number of children a woman gave birth to. So that means that if you had 30% child mortality rate and gave birth to 3 children, that meant that you buried 1 or 2 of your children on average in a country. Again, very tragically. But then we have come very far, and we have all these new methods. We have vaccines, and we have medicines, and we have doctors that can take care, and we know much more, and we have more money, and we have more food, and we have more education. So with that, from a situation where you either had more than 10% child mortality rate, and then also very many children per woman, because if 2 of your children die, that also increases children per woman. These are very closely connected. And the trend is that you first go down in child mortality rate, and then when you know that kids in this country survive, you also go down in number of children per woman. And this is the trend for all countries of the world in the last 40 years. This is the most positive graph I could see, because we would like to be at least below 10%, right, for most countries of the world. So let's click play and see what we go in China, very fast, India, Latin America now here, and North Africa was there in the 80s already. Africa falling a little bit behind, but you see how many countries is gathering in this corner in a way that we've never seen before. Again, many countries in sub-Saharan Africa is still quite high child mortality rate, but it's not at all 20, 30%. One country has 18%, the rest has below 16% and is going down. And countries that had very high child mortality rate of 20%, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Tanzania, Mozambique, has gone down very, very fast over the last 10 years. And this would never happen if it was a little small group in Tanzania who took all the money, or if the money just flew out of the country and didn't come to poor people. Then we wouldn't see this fast rate in progress when it comes to child health. This is the countries who made the biggest reduction in child mortality rate over the last 40 years. And look at these countries: Maldives, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Portugal, South Korea, a decrease with 95% in child mortality over the last 40 years. That's a tremendous effort and a tremendous progress that went faster than the countries that did that before. And if we look at the last 10 years, we have completely new countries: Botswana and Maldives and Rwanda, Estonia, cut down child mortality rate with 70% in just 10 years' time. I think that's fantastic. And why do I talk about child mortality? Why do I pick that? Yeah, well, 2 reasons. First of all, as I said, as an individual level, I can't imagine any more important issue. And although we live in a country like Saudi Arabia, where child mortality is very low, we are super scared that anything would happen to this Edward, my son. He once had a lot of dots in his face, and we ran to the hospital and said, "Why, can you help us?" And they said, "He got mosquito bites. You can go home again." Because we were so scared, although that we know that there are very few risks in countries that has done this trip already. So on an individual level, I can't say, and again, for most people of the world, that would be one of the most important things. So when we think about economic development, for very many people, that's a means to reach some of these goals, to solve some of these mysteries that kills children. If it's measles or malaria or lack of water and sanitation and whatever it is, we have seen that with the right efforts, with the right kind of money, resources, and the right technology and science, we can solve many of these issues. One very clear example is the vaccine against measles, that measles, a disease that killed 700, 800,000 children every year just 5-6 years ago. Although we had a vaccine 20, 30 years before that in very many countries, but poverty made poor countries and poor people in poor countries not being able to afford that. So then the international community helped and said, oh, at least there shouldn't be a lack of resources for the measles vaccine. So that was scrambled up between countries and organizations and so on. And today child mortality from the measles had dropped with 80-90% in sub-Saharan Africa and 70% worldwide. And we see that in area after area, when we take a technology that we figured out once in history and then just make it and apply it to the problem itself, then every issue isn't obviously that hard or that easy to fix. Most things when it comes to development are not quick fixes, but there are a few of those, and it took way too long before we made sure that everyone could access those services. And we've seen that in time after time. But so when I talk about child mortality, it's not only because it's important, but also because for us, we use it as probably the best measurement of development. In some cases, better than GDP per capita, but I wouldn't like to set them against each other. As I said, if we only use GDP per capita, then we would end up in the wrong place as measurement of success for a society and society development. But also if we only use child mortality or education, we have to see them combined. But what we figure out that if you want to see where the next changes will happen, keep an eye on child mortality rate because it captures so many things. It captures education, where a family can read, and the longer they went to school, the bigger chances of survival is it for their kids. It's the biggest factor for low-income countries. For everyone else, it's income or GDP per capita is the most crucial indicator. So money matters, education matters, peace and war and stability obviously matters, healthcare, access to healthcare, but also clean water and sanitation and all those basic infrastructure, roads, access to hospitals and so on to be able to go there, and again poverty. So all these areas is captured in that measurement. It's a very good measurement if you want to decide or say what the world is moving. So let me take a step back then and say and look upon the development in this world. Did we meet the expectations? And who set those expectations? Well, every country in the world signed up to those Millennium Development Goals. And they have been criticized for being from the top to bottom, it's just the UN who created these goals. But it's not quite true because every country signed up to these goals. Oh, sorry, it's in Swedish. I forgot to change that. But it's poverty, education, gender equality, child mortality, maternal mortality, healthcare, environment, and then a shared responsibility between the nations of the world. That is not only Malawi's government to eradicate poverty in Malawi, it's everyone's responsibility to eradicate poverty everywhere. So from those 8 goals that, again, every country in the world has signed up for, we were supposed to reach them between 1990 and 2015. I don't think they have influenced very much in the policies, but I think they have put the areas of healthcare and poverty and education on the international agenda. Every country, obviously, in their own plans has always talked about healthcare for its citizens. But now we have an international discussion, and the fact is that people have been talking child mortality or maternal mortality or education over the last quite turbulent decade, I must say, internationally, is a very good sign, I think. So some good have they definitely made. But now then, it's 2014, and we know which of these, specifically, there are good measurement. Did we do enough? Did the world move fast enough in the right direction? And then we can see poverty, hunger, education. Not all of them are measurable because not all of them had deadlines and so on. But between 1990 and 2015, the goal was to have poverty and hunger. And we actually did. We reached that goal. We reached all the way up, and we went down from 50% to 20% in poverty rate. Although hunger is still persistent in the world, and hunger rate is going down much slower than poverty rate. Education, still 1 out of 10 children in the world does not start primary school, but it's 90%. It's going in the right direction, but it's going too slow to reach the goal, universal education for every primary school kid in 2015, in 5 actually, but they moved it to 15. So we didn't reach all the way on that one. Girls in school, then we actually did reach on a global level. There are, at least in primary level, just as many, almost as many girls who start primary school than boys. When you come up to secondary school, the dropout rate is a little bit bigger for girls, but that's moving in the right direction. Again, that's, although not the only measurement of gender equality, but that was the only measurement that was in the Millennium Development Goals. They didn't have the courage to go further on some of these issues. But when it comes to child mortality rate, then, we reached half the way, because we said that the goal was to, until 2015, we should cut child mortality with 2/3. We managed to go 1/3, from 9% to 6%, but the goal was to go down to 3%. So we are falling behind that goal, but again, in the right direction. Maternal mortality rate, we see a little better statistics. We managed to have maternal mortality over the last 30 years. And all this is very good. And how do you measure sustainability? Well, there were very few indicators that were measurable in the, I would say, in the Millennium Development Goals. One was access to water, and that goal we reached, but carbon dioxide emission is going in the wrong direction. So that's the only goal that we going in the wrong direction. We emit more today than we did 2015. That was one of the goals. Sulfur is going in the right direction, however. So it's a bit split. It should go both ways, that goal. But this is the summary of the world's development over the last 20, 25 years. Yes, it's going in the right direction. Not fast enough, though, and we didn't reach many of the goals, but again, moving in the right direction. Poverty, we managed to have in 1 generation. That was the first step. Now the next step will be to eradicate poverty altogether. And poverty here is measured by the number of people living below $1 a day. So this is both very good and both very bad. In one sense, we thought that we would be further ahead. We thought that we would develop even more than we did. So that's a disappointment. On the other hand, all the columns here is actually going actually going up, almost. That means that when it comes to education and health and equality and hunger and poverty, the world today in 2014 is better than it's ever been before, statistically. And again, you can argue equality and divisions and so on, and it's going too slow or whatever, but the world today is actually statistically better than ever before. Never in human history has so many children survived their first 5 years on this planet. Never in history have so many women survived a pregnancy than today. Again, totally pointless that women are dying during childbirth, because if you have health care, that is preventable in most cases, but still it's going in the right direction. So we should have that as well, and this is the message when I'm out talking to kids and young people. This is the message I'm trying to persuade the most. Yes, we might not reach all what we thought we should, but at least we're going in the right direction, and we have to see that as well. If we just look super quick on poverty rates, it's gone down not only in the world, not only in East Asia, but in Europe, Latin America, North Africa. In South Asia will probably reach the goal in 2015, because this data is a little bit old. The only region where we don't see that goal being fulfilled is in sub-Saharan Africa. So it's not because if I would be standing here 5 years ago, the best data we had said, yeah, we are going to reach the goal, but it's only because of China. Now we know it's not only because of China. It's because of the Central European countries. It's because of Latin America, North Africa, and Middle East, but also India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. But when we look at the number, because the population is also growing, so I said it was 50% back then, now it's 20%. But then the population is growing, so totally, the total number of poor people is not falling that fast. It's 1.2 billion people today, and then 1 billion lives outside China, and then 200 million lives within China, you could say. So you can see that when it comes to numbers, East Asia is behind most of that progress as well. The problem with poverty measurement is that, as I said in the beginning, it's very hard to measure. And because you have to calculate so many things. First, how many people can't buy these and these and these goods, and then try to find a way of adjusting that to inflation, and then finding a way to do that purchasing power, so you can actually compare poverty in China with poverty in Tanzania, and with every such calculation, and when you do that historically, the margin of error becomes much bigger. As an example, the World Bank only 5 years ago said that now it's 900 million people in poverty. It's gone down to 900 millions, but then they just adjusted the levels a little bit about the purchasing power in different countries because they made a new census, a new calculation, and that meant that poverty went up from 900 to 1.4 billion. Without any poverty, it didn't increase, just that it was 50% bigger poverty than we thought it was. So I wouldn't use these numbers. I would rather use, if I'm going to talk about child mortality, I would use health indicators more than poverty numbers, or on national level, because that's a little bit easier to measure. And when we look at child mortality, I'm just picking out that goal because it captures, again, two things that I want to say. On one hand, the situation today, although it's moving in the right direction, is very, very urgent. We have to understand that this is urgent. If you compare how many children poverty kills in the world, 19,000 children every day, or 18,000 today, gone down a little bit. So we have 18,000 kids dying every single day from poverty. It's much more than wars or internal civil wars and so on. I don't think that in any country, in any given day, more people has been dying from a war, from violence, than from poverty, even in war-torn countries. Maybe, but then again, war affects the overall poverty rate. So again, yes, it is the wars that are killing people in Syria, for example, right now, even if they die of starvation. But the point is that poverty is the biggest killer in the world, because many of those 19,000 deaths would be preventable if it wasn't for the lack of resources or lack on a family level, but basically on a country level. Most kids that dies from pneumonia or lack of food, unclean water. Diarrhea is one of the biggest killers in the world, but also malaria kills a lot, and so on. So on one hand, we have to realize the situation of the world today and the system we have built up to keep it that way kills almost 20,000 children every day, on one hand. On the other hand, we can see that it's going very fast in the right direction. It was 12 million in 1990. Now it's below 7 million people killed that dies from poverty. And it's going down in every country, and as I showed you before, many poor African countries went very, very fast in the right direction. So it's both of these things at the same time. That is my point. And if I'm going to show you one graph of the two countries that decreased poverty rates or child mortality rates most over the last 30, 40 years, it's Maldives and Saudi Arabia. And if we look at that, we can see how great improvement in human life that is. To go from 30% child mortality rate, and losing 1 or 2 of your children on average in a family, to go down to that level of development. To have maybe 2 or 3 or even 4 children per woman, but to know that it's more than 99% chance of survival. What a huge difference, what a huge lift in human life and well-being from there to there over these years. And the most positive with that information is that almost all countries is there today. And it's a huge difference if we go back again from all countries back to 1950 and then again back to today. So yes, the world is in many areas, not all areas of the world obviously, but in very many areas that we can measure better than it's ever been. And specifically in one of the most basic pillar of human life, like this, we have come so far, but still we are still so far behind of what we think that we could be. So again, yes, to recap a little bit before I open up for questions if you have them. Some of the things, the trends I've been talking about, is that trends that we probably did know but didn't really think of in the general debate. At least that's what our studies have shown, that this is knowledge that simply isn't there when the debate actually started. Not in schools, not in universities, specifically not in the media sphere, because that's where you have lack of time to update your knowledge because you have to report very fast. So yes, it's important to at least some of these myths to have a more fact-based worldview. And when we look upon that, to see a little bit into the future, where do we land? Yes, we will be 10 billion people, or at least 9 billion. Not 134,000 billion, luckily, but at least 3 billion more. We will be richer, because this trend that we have seen in Asia, in Middle East, and now see in Africa, that income level is going up on a national level, on a regional level, on a family level. It will influence very many things. You can just see the changes. All countries have been growing fast for a couple of years, with huge development most countries have done over the last 10, 15 years. And what that means. As I said, we were 1 billion, less than 1 billion people in that area of middle income, higher life expectancy, welfare kind of life 30 years ago. And now we are 5 billion. And in the future, we will be 10 billion, but we will not be 10 billion poor people, because poverty will go down. So we will be 10 billion, and most of them will be fairly rich or extremely rich, and choose their lifestyle accordingly. And how those choices will be, we absolutely don't know. It's up for the future to show us. Because we cannot base future on that area. How we choose to live is not something we could base on previous lifestyles, because the world is changing often very, very fast. We know something though, and if we look at, for example, I know that you have been talking about, you do a lot of research on sustainability, and I think that's really, really good. Because as far as we can see from these very simple graphs, when we have not some kind of development level on one axis and some kind of environmental axis or sustainability axis. And again, it's hard to find good data on this one, because this is ecological footprint network that's been produced by Ecological Footprint Network in California, calculate this. And it's one way of showing how big influence on this planet we do have. It's not the best measurement, but it's one measurement. There are more. But it goes to show that the more developed the country is, the bigger footprint it has, because of the lifestyle and the choices we made in transport, in food, in housing, and so on, specifically with those technologies. But my point is this, that we know that this development will continue. We know that we'll be 3 billion more, but we know that and that's not so much, it's plus minus 30, 40%, but we know that income level and development level will grow 3, 4, 5 times. So if we can debate, is this world today sustainable or not? That's a discussion that we could have. But for me, the most interesting discussion is the one in 40, 50 years. And what do we have to produce, and what solutions do we need to find now for that world with 10 billion people living in this part of the world? Obviously, we cannot stop population growth more than up to 10 or 9 billion if we're not Dan Brown, or killing people. And I said that is not on the table. It's not on the table to stop development either, I must say. That's not an issue. I don't think any country can say, yeah, let's go back here. That's not on the table either. So it's up to technology. It's up to finding a way with a decent standard of living, where our kids can survive, and our mothers can survive the childbirth, and we can grow all together in the way we want without using up all the resources of this planet. And that's the only factor in this equation that I think we actually can, with some good moral change. And I think that's the real task for the future. I know that it's possible in many areas. How do I know that? Well, because we have fixed it in so incredibly hard areas of human development. When it comes to diseases that have been eradicated, when it comes to situations that previously killed a lot of people and now doesn't kill anyone, like polio that has always been eradicated from the world. We talk about 3 or 4 countries of this planet who still has polio. We saw the measles. We will see the same thing with malaria, TB, and even HIV/AIDS has started to go down and will go down quite rapidly when we have the right technology and medicine, not only in place but also available for poor people. So we have seen all this. When we do the right things with the right resources, the world becomes much better, and the people of the world will increase their well-being. So it's up to us in the future, I'd say, and that's my main message, because we can know where we're going, but we can guess pretty well. Guesstimates, we call it in Gapminder. We can guesstimate which kind of world we think we will have in 10 years, 20 years, and let's start planning for that instead of saying, oh, what should we have done 20 years ago? I think that's the best way of trying to come anywhere. I think I'll end up my speak there and say thank you for listening, and I will be glad to take any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
I do have a question, actually. Do you have
Yes.
the GDP as a parameter for the development and undeveloped country at the moment, for instance?
Yeah.
Is actually, how about the purchasing power? Because if I have 30K per year, I can expand that in my home, Indonesia, if compared to here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's unreasonable if you say it's rich or poor based on that money or income rate.
No.
Do you have comment on that?
Yeah, it's a good thing. We have chosen to have purchasing power adjusted in the graph because we think it's the only way you can compare countries in this way. Again, it's very, very hard because it depends on if you use the money internally or externally, as you said. So I think, again, to understand what's happening, you need both, I would say. You need one graph showing purchasing power parity and then one without. But in our graphs, we have chosen to have the numbers adjusted for that. And it becomes a little bit different, not so much because this is very general graphs and general development, and it will influence the message a little bit, but not super much, I would say, to have it not purchasing power. Then again, I wouldn't say that it's a very good measurement. It measures something. It measures production in a country, but to use it only as a measurement of development, I think is not very smart. That's why I try to use many other indicators as well. And online we have, I think it's 500 or 700 indicators that you can pick from. And I always think that GDP per capita, it shows something, but you can only use it for what it's worth, and it shows production or in a country and not much more. I don't know if that answers your question, but we have thought a lot about that, and we have decided that we will use purchasing power parity, even though others, the World Bank doesn't, and so on. But I don't know. It has its pros and cons, and you have to weigh them against each other.
So I have a question.
Yes?
It was indeed very heartening to know the significant drops in child mortality, maternal mortality that you noted. But if you consider these people who have come to the population, and if you consider the fact that in South Africa 40% of working age people are unemployed, in America close upon 25 million people are chronically unemployed, and this is all this population that has come, and a lot of the UN, the aid agencies have completely ignored these young people who are under or unemployed. And is there any plan to combat this?
It's a very good question. I couldn't do anything but agree on that issue. I don't work for the UN, and I can't talk for them. I can't even defend them on this area. I do agree. I think this is one of a few policy areas that hasn't been discussed nearly enough and focused on. We have unemployment, but we have also inequality in a country. But that also, mainly inequality depends on the ability to get a job. So most commonly is that the unemployment rate or the inequality rates depends on the unemployment levels. So we can see that in countries where inequality grows very fast, most of that increase is due, at least in the richer OECD countries, or United States and in Western Europe now, that income equalities grow very fast in all countries in Europe. And it's basically because production can't suffice job or employment to people. So yes, I think that's an area, one of many areas that aid industries have basically forgotten. Some in many areas, I would say. It's also hard because that is mainly one area that it's hard to see what the UN could do or an aid industry could do to influence that. And that is not only employment, there are many areas in policy making that is hard to from the UN's perspective. And maybe they can't be the salvation for that kind of problem. But yes, I do agree. I think it's a problem. I haven't seen any. I've seen some reports that try to tackle unemployment when it comes, at least lift it up as a huge problem, an increasing problem, from UNDP and a little bit in UNICEF in their independence inequality report. But yeah, I could just agree with you. I think it's not nearly good enough, and it will become a huge problem in not only for countries in conflict, if that's what we're talking about, but also for countries that, I mean, look at Europe now, how huge youth unemployment. And even in Sweden, that's been so proud of having this, been able to, we say that we managed the financial crisis better than anyone else, our finance minister said, but our youth unemployment is 25-30%, and it's not going down. It's higher than the rest of Europe, and it's not actually going down. So yes, I do agree. I think it is a huge problem, and I don't see it's been tackled enough. I've seen some reports, and when it comes to development studies, obviously it's there, but again, not so much as an indicator that influence the bigger development has. No.
I'm here.
Yep.
I really enjoyed the talk about, especially it looked very positive based on the data. We can see that the world is improving in all parts, more or less, and that's good to see, especially it's based on data rather than just news. However, the last slide sort of killed it all.
Yeah, I know.
It really showed that all the advance we make and all the improvement we have on all levels in all countries seems to be, first of all, seems to push us, everybody, into a world where we have 3 billion more and everybody has a much bigger ecological footprint. So, and you show that you reached all the, you moved towards all the goals you had set for the advancement of humanity, except for the sustainability.
Yeah.
So it really seems like our advance is based on exploiting and exhausting and depleting the natural resources, and in the future that will accelerate.
I'm not sure about the last thing, because yes, I do agree, the way we have done it up until now, yes. And then how we will do it in the future, it will depend on I would say, the political will to change the way that we are, the way of which kind of resources we are using and how we choose to live on this. And I would be very glad to see those countries, let me go back to that. It's the same graph basically when it comes to carbon dioxide emissions like this. We have GDP plotted against carbon dioxide emissions. We see the same thing, but it doesn't have to be like that. And if you see, United States have 20 ton per capita emissions, it's not really correct because it only shows emissions in the United States, which is quite unfair. Saudi Arabia is also there, up there, and China is also higher than it should be because China's production that emits carbon dioxide emission, when they produce things, toys, industries, cars, where do they sell them? Well, yeah, in the United States. So United States should be probably 35 ton per capita. Sweden shouldn't be 5 ton per capita. Sweden should be 12 ton per capita. It only goes to show that the way we did it so far has, yes, depleted the resources and lived on both the planet but on future generation. And it goes, but my point is that my dream would be that if those countries in this field now realize that not only is it impossible for all the world to live as they did up until now, they should also take the moral responsibility to be the leader in going down there. So we could be, because specifically if you argue for a lifestyle, if you have the moral argument that we would like to be here, somewhere here, then it falls upon them, or us in this case, to actually make that lifestyle in a way that's sustainable so that the rest of the coming 8 billion people also could live in exactly the same way. So far, they have not understood that. And so far, the discussion among our government in Sweden and most of the EU's government and the United States has been to point finger at China to say, hey, China is the biggest polluter today. Totally. Because China is 1.4 billion people, but per capita, they have 4 or 5 ton per capita. And the United States has 5 times, but actually maybe 10 times the real emissions. And we haven't seen that political discussion yet. I'm saying that I know it's technically possible. I know that we could do that. That's why I'm very optimistic. I'm not as optimistic on the fact that we actually will manage to find that political will or those resolutions. I'm not saying that everything will be fine, that we don't need to be worried. But I'm saying that the history shows us that if we really do want to change something, I think we can. And if we take this seriously. Now, obviously, we have, again, known this for 30 years, and the emissions is still going up every single year, except for the worst financial year, I think, I would say. But the train, we're discussing, yes, we should turn this train around. We should turn this train around. Should you turn it around? Now, how far should we go? Do we need to turn it around? But at the same time we are discussing this, we are still moving in the wrong direction when it comes to some of these sustainable areas. I don't know. Sometimes when I listen to brilliant professors or academics that seem to have some kind of more optimistic way, I think, we can do that, we will do that. And then next time I read another book and say, well, this is not going very good. So, and again, this is up to us and this is up to the people that actually forms this discussion in the end. That's one thing I've seen over and over again, people within the UN or that used to be in political power, like Gordon Brown, the Minister of Finance in United Kingdom. And every time a politician stops working as a politician, he says that the only thing that will bring real change is that when people demand it of us. We've seen that over and over again. And then I think, well, you were in power for 15 years. Why didn't you listen then instead of saying this now? But again, it's harder because you have interest and so on. And there are reasons for why the world looked like this. But my point is that the feeling I really have is that true change will not happen until people actually demand it. in any area. Look at the debt situation in sub-Saharan Africa, where nothing happened, and people said that for 20 years. And then when Bono, the Pope, and the people, and the Muslim leaders, and everyone came together and said, let's stop this. It's not only them, it's not only us, it's people want, it makes no sense that we have such high debt levels. And the Jubilee 2000 campaign that was very successful. And today, the debt burden is much lesser problem in Africa. Maybe one reason for that things starting going in the right direction. That was a long answer. I don't know if it even...
But I think it was an important answer, and especially, I mean, it shows that there's a time bomb.
Yeah.
And I hope that your data, which you said in the beginning, really serves the policymakers and us who can vote and change that to make the right decision.
But I need to have a way out. We need to say that, because this is so good that women don't die in labor. And that factor is not increasing those indicators. Child mortality rate, maternal mortality rate is not increasing the ecological footprint per se, but the increased lifestyle that brings better health care maybe does so far. So, but if we see what factors are influencing what, I think I need to know that there is a way out, and we need to feel that we can do this if we realize the reason. That's why I usually ends up with this, like scaring people. But if we realize that we should have started 30 years ago to change some of these things, then we would be better off. But again, if we say that it's not today's situation we should fix, it's the situation in 2040 or something, then I think we have better chances of success.
Thank you.
Thanks. I did one more question. Yeah, but she just raised her hand. Short one. Is that okay? Or do we? Sorry.
Okay, it goes in the same direction, because it's the last goal that is not reached that is negative, and you mentioned that it's, access to water plays an important role.
Yes.
So could you comment a little bit on that?
Yes, very shortly then. Access to water and sanitation is both pillars in the environmental goal, and they are crucial to all the other goals. One of the biggest killers of the world for children today is lack of clean water and good sanitation. Diarrhea kills probably more than 1 million children every year, normal diarrhea from polluted water. So the goal was to say that we should have the population that without access to water in a certain area, in a certain way, should we have. So if it was 20% that lacked access to water, then we should go down to 10% that lacked access to water. And that goal we have reached. But still, there are too many poor people that don't have access to clean water. But when we say clean water, it's also definition on how close do this well has to be, and how clean must the water be. I think, again, that this is only the first step, and the goal must be to have really secure water in your house for every household, because that's needed. That's one of the most basic human things that you would need in your life, as well as electricity, I would say, and other areas that helps human lives in a good way. We are not nearly enough there yet. Sorry, I have to speak now. Stop. But feel free to come up and ask some more questions. Is that, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.